Good day, you bored human. Today, I will show you how I paint the world's most popular superhero, Spiderman. We start the process by printing the model in resin 3D printer. This model was sculpted with just the mask. However, I wanted to display it mask off. So I searched for an alternate head sculpt and edited the part that can mount with the body. I was rooting for Tobey Maguire, but since I cannot find one, I settle with the Tom Holland instead. Also, I replaced the original base with a round base of the Thing from the Fantastic Four. The base of Spiderman was too big for my printer to fit, even if I cut it. I removed the Thing in the base by cutting it on the slicer app. However, I cannot cut the feet all the way true, so I need to remove it manually. But not with my hands. I don't have that strength of the Thing. So I used this handheld rotary cutter to remove the remaining feet of the Thing. I cut those parts gradually, minimizing the surface to be removed to avoid damaging the base. I should have removed this from the slicer app before printing, but I am not that, as they may say. Techie. After removing the feet, I planned to cover this holes with the hydrant and sewer cover. I then placed Spidey in the base to check how will I arrange him along with the base. I decided to pose Peter Parker, facing up while stepping on an elevated rubbles. I believed the original posing of this model was facing mid-level in act of running. I then drilled holes to add metal rods. This will be the contact point of our hero when I place him. It will also give a sturdy and steady grip when I mount him in this base. I drilled holes for the parts where I intended to put magnets, and make sure to put the magnets on opposing pole. Also, placing the magnets on contact with each other is an obstacle, a very difficult thing to do. About 4 magnets were stuck inside the figure that I cannot remove due to overpressure while pressing the magnets in place. I almost consider not doing the alternate head and just fix the mask off head to skip putting the magnets, but I felt that it was awkward. Yes, I wanted to display this figure without mask, but that doesn't mean I will not put on the mask. Spider-Man was famous because he is Spider-Man with a mask, right? Anyways, I mixed snow effect beads with glue and apply the mixture in some areas of the base. Since the scale of this base was small, blowing it to a bigger scale will render most of the details vaguely. The mixture will help alter some details to pop. I then fill the gaps with a putty, leaving it overnight to dry. Using Q-tips dipped in water, I tried to flatten the putty before it dries. And since I am using a Q-tips, here's a quick tip. You can use putty in gaps and areas that are curved or wrinkled, and 2 parts epoxy or wood fillers in flat surfaces like floors or wall. Spray primer in the areas with putty before sanding to have a clear view on which parts needs to be sanded. Then apply primer on the whole figure once I cleaned and smoothen all the area in preparation for the base coating. I found a classic lettering of Spider-Man online, perfect for the side of the base. Using a hot air blower, I heated it and molded it on the side, indicating the front area of the base. I moved on by spraying black paint on the shadowed areas and parts that I wanted to have a volume when color is applied. Notice that I didn't cover the whole model with black. That's because I am going to add a white spray paint to do a zenithal or volumetric highlighting. Paints from spray cans tend to add excessive amount of paint, leaving some of the details unrecognizable. In other words, bad. I will then paint the upper body with red. design on his costume black, I will show you a trick that I learned while hanging out with other painters. And when I say painters, I mean this painters. Oh, fly high! Anyway, the trick is to use a panel liner and a paint thinner. Run the panel liner along the lines and let it settle for a little longer before removing the mess with the paint thinner. Just keep in mind that you need to seal off the previous paint with top coat or varnish and give it a proper drying time before applying the paint thinner. See, paint thinner was designed specifically for oil-based enamel paints, and I'm using a water-based acrylic. Oil and water don't mix. I painted the legs and remaining parts of the body with blue by brush since I hated to do masking. It's time for the alternate head to paint. I started it by applying the usual mixture of base coat for the skin, mixing flesh white, flesh, and oak brown, with the both flesh mix in equal parts, then a drop of oak wood to darken the shade. I added a contrast paint of Regal flesh just to stimulate the freckles and imperfection to the skin by lowering the pressure on my airbrush and spritzing it on the model. I then cover the area with the base coat mixture, added with water on an equal amount. This is a method I learned, and as my peers says, glazing, just to lighten up the skin from the freckles. I then apply dark brown oil pastel to darken up the skin. And yes, I didn't do the washing. That's because I'm avoiding putting more level of paint with this sculpt. Cause if you didn't notice, the eye on this model has that concave area along the iris. I am trying to retain that since that will be my guide later on when I apply paint along the eyes. I then work my way up on painting the escalera of the eye while retaining that part of the iris with a darker hue of gray. I then apply pink around the escalera to imitate the color of the lower eyelids. This also gives the color separation between the eye and the skin tone of the face and lids around the area. Started to work on the iris of the eye by putting black paint. Then comes back to apply brown paint to complement its eye color. A quick tip: always apply a small amount of paint when working on the eye. Thin down the paint with water for better application. It's always easy to cover the area bit by bit, then covering it heavy with the paint on the first application. It also gives you control on how dark or light the color you need for the eye. Also, do not rush on applying paint along the eye, especially on the escalera and iris. Start with a dot, then move on to a bigger circle. It is easy to make the circle bigger than to make a bigger circle smaller. Once you apply paint on the escalera, seal it with a top coat, then leave it for a couple of minutes to come back and work on the iris. Remember, the secret in painting the eye is to not rush. After working on that laborious part, it's time for the hair. Start by brushing bone claw to darken up those crevices. I will then apply olive brown paint for the hair. This will complement the brown brunette color of the hair when I will cover it with Regal flesh. I used a dark contrast paint for the eyebrow. Since contrast paints tend to get darker the more you apply, it gives me that faded color effect that was perfect for imitating the hair on the brows. You might think that this olive brown doesn't sit well with the hair. Relax. As I have told you, contrast paints tend to get darker the more layer you apply on the surface. It will cover this lighter shade of brown and give it a brunette color for the hair. I will then add night or contrast paint to Spidey's suit to give that shadow effect on this figure. Last to work with would be the base. started off by painting it all over with black spray paint. Then apply the method of dry brushing with a lighter shade of gray. When dry brushing, use a brush with a soft bristles. Finding a proper soft bristle brush is important since these bristles affects the distribution of paint to the surface of the model. A quick tip: the best bristles would be those brushes that are meant for the skin of a human, since they are designed to be soft, not to cause itch on a person's skin. Softer and nicer brushes would be those brushes that your wife are using. Sure, they cost a lot since that's what they do, buying nice and expensive things for themselves. Well, that's not a tip. I am just messing with my wife. Let's continue. I paint the metallic parts on the base with chrome. I will then cover them later with a brownish contrast paint, or Ancient Earth. Yes, that's the name of the color of that contrast paint, Ancient Earth. What a name! By the way, I am using Hiro paints and Armored Komodo, a local brand of acrylic paints here in my country. Ever since I started this hobby, I never do have an opportunity to use those international brands of paints that are common in the hobby. So please, I do apologize. Also, this is not a paid or sponsored video. I just wanted to share my hobby to those bored humans like you who are watching this video. Let's get back. I painted those bullets with copper, 'cause that's what the color of the bullet should be, right? And this fire hydrant. I'm not sure whether I will be using red or yellow to color it. But since Spiderman's color was red and blue, I just decided to balance it with yellow, just to have a contrast. Or contradict, as I might say. I added weathering effect on this hydrant. The reason? Well, I bet you cannot find a perfect-looking colored hydrant in your vicinity. If so, that wouldn't be working. It might be a display. Since hydrant holds back water, and water reacts with metal, and metal do rust with water, and... well, I just wanted to show you how to weather it. I proceed to add silver on those parts of the hydrant that needed to be metallic in color with a silver-colored marker. Then printed a fire department logo on a decal paper to add it on the fire post. Quick tip: when you print on a decal paper, apply top coat for the printed paper to protect the pigments of ink that was on the decal. Glossy top coat would be better since it gives a vibrant look to the ink. I will soften up the decal in water to separate, then carefully place it on my desired point where the logo should be. Then finish it with a top coat to protect the decal's adhesion to the model. Lastly, I painted this logo with red and the web with white. A reminder, when painting red and yellow, always apply a white undercoat before it. White helps these colors to pop out that vibrancy and brightness. In contrast, metallic colors like silver and gold should have a black undercoat to eliminate the brightness underneath the surface of the model.
Stretch my hand, blow my grip.